Hello and welcome to the Takeaway with Chicago Town, our live show here on Ballsdotie, where we give immediate reaction to each Ireland game in the Six Nations Championship. A win at last, 48-10 for Ireland over Italy in Rome. We're going to talk about all of that now. Delighted to say we're joined once again by Munster and Ireland legend David Wallace. David, that was a bit better at least.
Yeah, it was. Good to get a win. Obviously 2 losses at the start of the campaign wasn't a great start, albeit they were close. But yeah, I think, no matter what the opposition or whatever, it was good to get a win and try and build a bit of momentum for the latter part of this campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. Our second guest today is a former Ireland coach, a winner of 2 Triple Crowns Ireland, but more importantly, he is the voice of the deep dive with Chicago Town here on Balls.ie. Eddie O'Sullivan, you're very welcome. How are you?
Great.
And predicted the game perfectly as usual on the deep dive this week, especially where Ireland should get their scores.
Yeah, I think they managed the game really well. It was obvious coming up to half time they had the bit between their teeth, and the key in Italy is to get a couple of scores ahead going into half time and then score early in the second half, and the Italians know it's game over then, and it's a much easier day than if you keep them in the game for long periods. So I think we managed the game really well. It's kind of, the performance today is a shot in the arm. It's exactly what we needed. We knew going there we'd win. We just had to put in a performance. So it's hard to be critical of a team that scored 6 tries. But I thought it was a great performance. Credit all around to everybody for getting it done. But word of warning is, and we may talk about that later, this doesn't mean everything is fixed. There's issues there that we don't know about yet. But look, in terms of the guys going out there making a statement, they did exactly what was asked of them. And I'd be very happy at that tonight if it was in Rome.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll get into all the positives and negatives and how much we can take from either in just a minute. Of course, though, it wouldn't be the takeaway with Chicago Town without some Chicago Town pizza, the perfect addition to any Six Nations game. David, I know we went for the same choice for today's game, the cheese stuffed crust, load of pepperoni, savage stuff. There's yours, along with your prediction, I think, coming up now in a second for the game. We had it on our Instagram page earlier. There we go, 35-12. I suppose not too bad, actually. It was, a few points off, but the Italy games are never the easiest scores to predict. Just want to let everybody know, I do want them to get your comments in, be part of the show. We want your comments all the way through to put to the lads. If you have a comment, you go into a draw for an Ireland jersey and some Chicago Town pizza voucher, so please do get involved. We've got one here, I know, straight off, that I just wanted to get to, that Shane might pull up here. There it is. Where was that energy and drive for the last 2 games? Can we take this onto the Scotland game? David, I don't know if you thought that. It did seem like after just even the first 5 minutes, Ireland did just seem at a different pace and momentum than they were in the previous 2.
Yeah, they played with a lot more tempo. I think, they played a quicker game, put Italy on the back foot, got them to make decisions in defence. They actually played a lot deeper as well, certainly in the back line, and it really made Italy come out of the line, and a little bit of indecision created gaps for them. But I thought, Sexton had a very good game. I think he was missing at times. Obviously, at the end of the Wales game, he went off, and against France he wasn't there. So I thought he added a lot of structure, but also the likes of the front row we saw with Kelleher, Furlong, and Kilcoyne. They were, all carrying really well, and I thought that made a big difference. Just guys who were putting us on the front foot and making it easier for the halfbacks to make those decisions and put the defence on the back foot and have them second guessing. So it was a much better performance all round. All right, it was weaker opposition than the last 2 games, but I think we've maybe found a little bit more of a formula of how we want to play, and maybe how we didn't play well in the last couple of games. Very flat, very easy to defend. So it was good to see that bit more of that power game, that ball carrying coming to the fore against Italy.
Would you agree with that, Eddie? Or I know the opposition does actually have to come into the conversation as well. I mean, Ireland were getting that go forward ball because they're probably facing a weaker defence, which allows us to get more dynamic as we go through the phases. But at the same time, it was refreshing to see. That's a
valid point. But I think before that, I think it goes down to how we started the game, the intent we brought into the game. The first line out, we went over the top to Robbie Henshaw. We didn't even throw it to the forwards, went straight over the top. Henshaw hit it a great line. We're in behind the Italians and we're on the front foot. And I thought for that first period, there was a different intent. Now, the intent was because we were actually playing with a bit of width. We're on the front foot. passes were sticking, so we'd minimum mistakes. So that kind of gives everybody a burst of energy that, right, it's a good day out today, and that lifts guys. Whereas sometimes when you start those games and you're under pressure, and they were under pressure for a result today, if the first couple of things go wrong, the line-out goes askew, somebody gets turned over their rock, everyone kind of goes into themselves. But I think the way we started the game, and immediately Italy knew like they were going to be in for a tough day, and they were really have to go and play beyond themselves to contain us, which they weren't able to do. So I think the start to me was very important. The ambition and the energy they brought, I think, was excellent. So I thought mentally they got their build up right. Like they had the energy at the right pitch, where they were actually delivering huge physicality, and they had the confidence then to pass the ball on the front foot. And sometimes you do that, you can overcook the thing and you can make mistakes. But to do that and keep the mistakes to a minimum, that gives you that kind of surge you need. So I thought that was excellent. And then, the defence or the opposition, we can talk about that. But I'd like to pay tribute to the team under a situation where they're under a lot of pressure, a lot of negative talk around the team, having to go out there and just deliver like from the off, not having to settle in period and stuff. So I thought starting the game without a settling in period was great. I really thought that was really good, because I thought from the off we looked in a good place.
I think, Eddie, even the scoreline didn't reflect fairly on Ireland, because you think we had 3 disallowed tries, and a couple of those are very suspicious. You think of the one that it was a stander, or no, sorry, it was
Henderson.
It was Henderson, sorry, who got.
Well, that was a try, Wally. Henderson's try was a try.
Clear cut,
just bad TMO work. He got pressure on the ball, and that would have been a fit, payment for their effort. Like they deserved that try. But I think the score, didn't do them justice. Now, you'd have to say, how did that happen? Because we did go quiet in the second half for a period when we had really Italy on the rack. And Italy, to be fair, I thought fell apart just coming up to half-time. I thought coming to half-time, geez, if Italy don't do something here, and not even including their try, just the way they were tackling and getting run over, that they could lose by 60 or 70 points. But in fairness, Italy came up in the second half and they hung in. They just hung in. But you can't hang in giving away penalties like Italy have given them. Like they're giving away like confetti. It was 18 penalties against Italy. Like that's double what you can get away with in a test game. So I don't think Italy gave up, but they just weren't at the races.
We saw my prediction there earlier, Mickey. They got that very close to it. I think it was Ireland were 34-10 just after half time. When they scored that try. So I agree, Eddie. I thought they were going to really kick on from there, and it was going to be cricket score. But in fairness to Italy, but I think a bit of it was possibly Italy's game in terms of actually the penalties helped them, the amount of penalties they gave away, because it made it a really disjointed, slow game. Yeah. I think there was Ireland obviously maybe went to the corner a couple of times, a little bit of inaccuracy or giving away penalties in terms of being offside at that line out is something they'll focus in on, and it let Italy off the hook, and against stronger competition, that's dangerous.
You could actually see that at one stage in the second half. I think it was when Italy got the second yellow card and there was another penalty, and the Irish lads all just threw their hands up in the air like they were frustrated with it, even though they were going to get, Sexton was nailing the 5-yard line with every kick, so they were going to get a try scoring chance, but it was like as if their play had been disrupted and their momentum, and that was an interesting actually insight. You don't often see that, but I thought that was a sign of what you're saying. I'm just wondering
at the end there they started taking the quick taps as well. Did you see that? So
exactly.
And that actually got them over the line in the
I think the backs were frustrated there, lads, because they knew that if the forwards got their hands on that ball 5 meters out, they were never getting it to the backs. And it was successful. Like they were going to run over Italy eventually. So you can tell the backs tearing their hair out that this is not coming back to us. But I agree. That all the penalties did break the game up, and it does affect your tempo. There's no doubt about that, Wally. You're right. But I think Ireland ticked a lot of boxes today. Like the scrum was excellent, the lineup was excellent. Our defence was pretty much on point in terms of balance, which has been a problem. Our rucking was good. We counter-rucked at the right time. We went after their ball at the right time. And then when we got in the front foot, we looked really polished. So, that's a lot of boxes ticked. And I do think, maybe if we'd been a little more accurate at times, a little bit luckier at times, we could have hit 60 today. But maybe, you know what, sometimes when you hit 60, you don't get any credit because they say the opposition was so bad, you know, that listen to that, and you know, sometimes when you keep it a little bit tighter, you know,
you're better off with 48.
It's a no-win,
it's a nice
you win by
number
60,
away
just so they're useless. Anyone could beat them by 60, you know, so maybe you're better off keeping it, you know, within a range.
While we stick to positives and box ticked, and I do think there's serious questions that need to go into how much we can take on to Scotland with this, but offloads at last is what the headline says there below us. And I think that, you know, we've been criticised for it so much, as me and Eddie were talking even before we started, that it's a fairly routine thing, but the fact that they did come and lead to 2 tries in the first half did make it at least stand out that we were trying them a little bit more. Did to Italy what France did to us last week, David, and it's just something that like we just haven't seen enough of from this team. But again, how much is that because we're on the front foot against Italy rather than a complete change in mindset like we may have talked about a couple of weeks ago?
It's 100% being on the front foot. You know, if you're surrounded by players and you're flat-footed, you know, you're coming up against the wall of defenders, you know, the last thing you want to do is throw away, throw an offload. You know, you have to be getting in behind the opposition and with players flooding through either side to be able to put those offloads in. So, you know, I think over the last couple of years, and even under Joe Smith, we saw a little bit of I suppose a feature coming in where we were taking the ball standing and very flat. So yeah, it's great to see today now players, you know, forwards and backs, you know, being deep, coming onto that ball at pace. And even Will Connor's try there, yeah, that was fantastic. I think it was from a little offload from was it Larmer, I think, maybe possibly, but
yeah, Larmer,
Ring was for Larmer, I can't remember, but it was, you know, it was a perfect line coming at deep, and you know that's the way we want to see Ireland firing. But even in around the breakdown, you know, the forwards are taking it at speed, and they're trusting that, you know, that they're going to put a little bit of footwork on, and you know,
I'm sure Wally would agree that I'm sure you'd agree that the dividends from the Irish forwards, the carrying were huge. You know, we were winning the collisions by 2-3 meters, and then the ball was back like lightning. But I think the other thing as well is, if you look at Italy a little bit, they have this up and in defence, so they come up and in, which is fine. Lots of teams are doing it, but they're really bad at it. They're not sure, particularly guys on the outside who are most exposed have to be very smart. And it sounded to me like the Italian outside backs were like dogs chasing a car. When they caught it, they didn't know what to do with it. So when they got up into that defensive zone, when it's on the outside channel, they were all over the shop. Like they either pushed up too far or they went down and double tackle low, like, which is a disaster. If you double tackle low, the guy will offload the football. Like, it's the easiest thing to play in the world to make. So the Italians really were actually awful in terms of giving up quick ball, which is going to kill you, and then defending like lemmings on a cliff face, like in the outside channels. Like a lot of those offloads that we got away for scores came from 2 guys tackling low, which is just criminal. You know, you can't do that at that level. Like, I mean, you can't do it at club level. So, like, as Wally said, to go forward and guys letting you get your hands free, like that's a recipe for offloads all day. And we did offload. No, the thing is, against the better teams, I don't think you'd give you that opportunity. They're smarter around the tackle area. And they flood those channels smarter, that even though you get your hands free, there mightn't be a pass on. So we did it today. We got the opportunity, and yeah, it's great to see the offloads, but they'll be harder to come by against a smarter team. That'd be the real test, you know.
Are we obsessed with
Ireland as well playing deep? I think, Eddie, because, you know, playing deep,
at last,
it forces Italy to come up out of the line, and they lose their shape, and you get guys going in, one guy coming up, one guy not coming up fast enough. That creates the gaps. So, in fairness to Ireland, you're playing that depth in attack, just really kind of, I suppose, lulled them into.
It did sucker Italy into making those mistakes. Wally, that defense came flying up, and then it lost its shape when it got up. You know, so they got into the space and didn't know what they were doing. Italy, like they were like droning out there. But yeah, and Mick, you were just asking there, like, are we overemphasizing it? I think, it's
in general, I
suppose, it's a legacy issue for Andy Farrell, because it was a big, you know, it was a big discussion around Joe Schmidt, who seemed to have outlawed the offload. You know, I don't think if he ever did that, but he was so hard on guys turning the ball over that guys did a cost-benefit analysis and said, okay, unless it's a 90% success, I'm not going to do it. And that's not the worst thing either. But I think the other side of it as well is that you create those offloads as part of your attack. It's the culmination of really good attack. And Ireland haven't delivered that really good attack in the first 2 games. You know, we haven't kind of cut teams up and got them on the back foot and got them to turn their shoulders. And when we do that, like we did today, yeah, there's offloads out there, but I don't think there was as many opportunities. Now, it was a bit of as well when you see guys, you know, just running straight back into contact and not offloading when they might. That adds fuel to the discussion. But I think today was definitely easier, and to be fair, they took the opportunities, and the dividends are very high for offloads. There's no doubt about that. But there's a risk element to it. I don't think there was a risk element today because it was so clean cut and they executed it well. But it was, as Wally, go back to Wally's point, is all based on us really killing Italy on the gain line, just getting over the gain line incessantly, and then the Italian defence are struggling.
Yeah, so if offloading, David, is a facet of general good play rather than one specific thing. So you're talking about Ireland coming from deep. We're talking about being on the front foot, various different things. What did we see today, if anything, if maybe, you know, if we're saying, oh, we're not going to offload like that against Scotland, certainly not against England, the better defence. What did we see today that can make our attack less blunt against a better team, if anything? Because the answer could be nothing. You know, we might have learned nothing from today.
No, I think we did. I think players will kind of take a look, and even if you look at the starting front row there, and the guys who are on the bench, which was pretty much, you know, that was the starting front row in the previous games, they'd be looking at how that front row played. They came onto the ball at depth, put a bit of footwork on it, were very aggressive in their carries, and gave us great momentum, and that's been lacking a little bit, I think, in the previous couple of games, you know, and the likes of Furlong, Kilcoyne and Kelleher were able to do that, and you know, maybe you mightn't be able to do it as easily against, you know, Scotland or England, but I think you'll certainly have a big impetus and a big momentum giver against those teams. So it'll be interesting to see selections. But yeah, I think that was for me. It was a big part of it. Look, the other thing I think was Sexton was back and he was on song and he was controlling it. And I think the first break we got off that scrum, you know, Gibson Park gave it to Sexton, and we made that breakdown there. That led to our kind of initial kind of first assault into Italy's territory and you know, eventually getting those tries. But yeah, I think he helps an awful lot and gives us a bit of structure. And you know, at the moment, I think we're certainly struggling in terms of backup. Great to see Joey Carby coming on and getting a bit of game time last night, though.
Yeah, it is funny though how much, you know, on a week when that's dominated by talk of Johnny Sexton's possible retirement and then him dismissing it and so on and so forth, that he kind of does everything that's good about the Ireland backline comes through him on a day like this. Do want you to get your comments in. I know we've got a few of them to get to. Of course, everyone who makes a comment will go into a draw for an Ireland jersey and some Chicago Town pizza vouchers. And we've got one up here saying, it's Italy, cannon fodder year after year, need relegation in the Six Nations. We were going to get to that, Eddie. I mean, you don't want to be this kind of like, it's rare enough that Ireland are at the top table of anything, so you don't want to be this country coming in talking about how the minnows don't deserve a chance. But it does feel like in the Six Nations, this becomes the down game of every year for all the countries. And it's just... After so long now, is it 29 games now without a win since after today?
It's 21. I think it's the 21st Six Nations or 20th Six Nations.
Is that
so
all?
You look at it over look at over the Six Nations history, which is 20 years is long enough to get your house in order. You know.
Yeah.
Italy have been the whipping boys. Let's be honest. The occasional win, which usually costs the opposition coach's job. You know. I mean, that's how it's measured. And like I'd like to see Italy in the tournament, but it's never good for a tournament to have one team that's just basically a whipping boy every year. But for example, if you look at this year, look at England. I think England took themselves out of the championship by not winning by enough points against Italy. Whereas France did. France put 50 up. England didn't, for whatever reason. So now they're chasing a points difference. If they want to go into the last weekend with a chance of winning. So it comes to the point where your points difference against England or against Italy can be a factor in your championship, you know, and that's what Italy are seen as now. It's not only you beat them, it's how many can you beat them by, because if you slip up one game, you don't win a Grand Slam, you win 4 out of 5, you're hoping for a points difference result. And the Italy game is the one where you get your points difference, because every other team, you know, could keep you tight. So there is a case for what are Italy doing here, and you know, it's the same in the Pro 14, you know. They're not delivering in the Pro 14. They haven't won a game this year. I think I might be wrong on that, but I think it's pretty paltry. So what do you do if you kick them out? Well, who are you going to bring in? Well, Georgia aren't going to do any better. I don't care what anyone says. Like, but Georgia through 7 weeks of this, and they'll be just as punch drunk as Italy. The big one is, do you bring in South Africa? Well, that's a game changer. And that's why I actually talked to Gus Piche about that. We go back 10 or 11 years ago. We were talking, and he thought was interesting at the time. This is 10 years ago, so I give him credit for it. Not my logic is that World Rugby is going to break up, instead of Southern Hemisphere or Northern Hemisphere, is going to break up into 3 areas. There's going to be Europe, Africa, and then you'd have Australasia, including Japan and the Pacific Islands, and the Americas. And his worry was that if that happened, Argentina were so far ahead in the Americas, it would do them no good. But like, imagine the difference South Africa would make coming to the Six Nations. And already we're seeing they're trying to get their Super Rugby teams into the Pro 14 as we know it.
That could be the first step as well, Eddie. Yeah, I mean,
it's much easier.
Perfect sense for South Africa.
It's much easier to get up here from South Africa than to get to New Zealand or Australia.
Time zones and everything else.
Overnight,
as well,
exactly. Like, can you imagine the difference it makes the tournament in terms of television rights and money? Like, when rugby, is hanging on by its fingernails. So,
does rugby have any obligation to an Italy, or you're saying Georgia would be in the same boat? We did say 20 years ago, you get Italy in and they will get themselves up to speed by necessity, and it hasn't happened. But at the same time, you don't want to just cut off access to the peak of the game, do you?
Yeah, and it won't happen unless somebody puts a deal on the table that increases the revenues dramatically with South Africa coming on board. Then everybody will say, oh yeah, well, they had their chance. At the moment, it's, we can't kick them out. It's not going to change on them. But if somebody rocked up with a ton of money, puts on the table and says, if you leave South Africa into the Six Nations, this is what's going to happen TV-wise. Everyone goes, oh, hold on a minute, let's reconsider. Like, money does speak. And the Six Nations are very it's probably it's the only tournament that's annually profitable in World Rugby as far as I know. The World Cup's the other one, but every other tournament loses money. This one makes money. So if you can make even more money, but yeah, it sounds harsh, but 20 years and you're still the whipping boy doesn't, when is this going to change for Italy? It's not going to change, let's be honest. It's not going to change. I can't see it changing. We haven't even seen an incremental improvement in 20 years. And people say, oh, that's very harsh and it's unfair. But the results speak for themselves. Italy,
I'd say they've gone backwards, Eddie. The first few years, they would, they'd usually have someone have a banana skin against them, and they'd get a win every maybe couple of years. But it's 5 years now since we've seen a win.
The great irony for Italy is, if you played Italy in the 90s, they were way better. Italy got into the 5 Nations, 6 Nations too late. Yeah, if they got into the 5 Nations and made the 6 Nations in the 90s when it was amateur, I'll tell you something, it would have been a different ball game. We couldn't beat them in the 90s. We were consistently beaten by Italy, and they had some great results. But that Italian team kind of evaporated, and they started from scratch again, and the rest is history.
Well, there's a good bit to consider there. I think it'll go on for another while. I suppose the as Eddie mentioned, it costs coaches jobs, whatever. Not even always, but I mean, even on Balls.ie this morning, we put up a retrospective of the infamous day in 2013 where Ireland lost, which kind of shows you everything there is to know about what happens when you lose to Italy. It goes down in history. So it is a pity, but it's something that we'll talk about a long time. But let's go back to Ireland, lads. There were some new faces today. I mean, we saw Casey and Bird off the bench, which was great. But even in terms, I thought, you have to say that Will Connors was super impressive, David. Every time I see him, he stands out a mile for me. Can you tell me, as somebody that's a legend in his position, is he as good as he might look to the untrained eye? He just seems to do everything. He seems to, his chop tackling, his work on the ground, and then he's in the loose, he's just scoring 2 tries, one off the maul and one in the loose as well,
Yeah, he's got a great work rate. And I suppose anytime you're asked that question, I always kind of picture, how would it be to play against someone like that, And you could see he would annoy and frustrate you all day. He's aggressive in the tackle, and he's everywhere. He's a good engine. He's a big guy as well too. He's, as I say, he got on the end of a couple of tries as well too. Now they're probably in close. You'd like to see him maybe have a little bit more in the wider channels, a little bit more in the ball carrying. But he's not bad at that either. But I suppose you're thinking of the complete player. But yeah, certainly is he is an excellent player at the moment, and I think he's really thrown his hat into the ring there because of the performances we've seen. You know, I think he's been right up there in this year's Six Nations. So a lot of competition in that area, but he's certainly put his name in the ring.
As it's always been, Wally. I mean, the ridiculous part of Irish rugby, if we could produce the same caliber of players in the back rows in every other part of the team, we'd win the World Cup. Like, we have for over 20 years consistently produced multiple back row players. And I'm not just blowing smoke at Wally here because he was part of that, but we consistently produces bucket loads of world-class back row players who we get into most teams, but we've so many of them in Ireland. You can only pick 3 on a team and put, one on the bench maybe, or a tweener. And this has gone on for 20 years. So here's another guy, Connors, now just comes on the scene going, oh, Jesus, where did he come out of? He's the real deal. But there's about 20 real deals in the country. It's funny. It's an amazing place that's one area we've consistently produced world-class talent. And to me, it's a great headache for a coach. Like, when I was there picking the back row, like, it was always a headache trying to get because you're down to minutiae whether you pick one guy over another. It's not like there's even a gap, but there's nothing in it. And I think he's another diamond who we've discovered. Yeah. So, like, it's a nightmare to be in the back row in Ireland because you could be one of the best around and just an injury or somebody gets in front of you. And it's great. It's great for us to have that. But he's just another one of those diamonds, and he ticks all the boxes straight off the bat. So you're going, geez. Like,
and even if Ty Byrne coming in from the second row and playing in the back row,
it's really relentless. Like, I mean, and there's other guys on the fringes as well. Like, there's another batch waiting to eat their lunch. Yeah. So, like, it's a great place to be. But it's that particular area of our game we've always delivered like fantastic talent. Like,
what about somewhere where we haven't? It's not. We have a great history there, but it has like. Rory Best was around for a long time and we haven't had a replacement really to put his mark on the game so far. Did Kelleher do enough, Eddie, to think that maybe at least for the rest of the tournament it's his jersey?
Yeah, I think, he ticks all the boxes in terms of his technical stuff, his scrum, his line out. He's good around the field, but he's got that extra shift of gear when he gets the ball, which for a hooker is important, and I think he's, at the moment, and again, there's not a lot in it, but I think he's a guy that should be starting. He brings a bit of fizz with him from the off. It's like Sean Cronin used to bring off the bench a lot. He's not as quick as Cronin, but he's that ilk of a player. He's deceptive as well. Like, he doesn't look fast or big until he runs past you, and then you get a great view of him. So I think he's probably nicked that short for the time being, but I don't think he can rest in his laurels either, though.
No, for sure, but it's definitely it's somebody's jersey to grab at the moment, and I suppose it's his chance to do it. Lads, we have a comment here about the decision that Wally mentioned earlier about Henderson's try. I just want to get to it quickly and then move on. But the decision to disallow Henderson's try has to be looked at. Why was that decision made? Clear downward pressure against England or another nation where we might only get one chance, and that is the difference between winning and losing. That decision could, I think, be the difference between winning and losing and cost us. So, look, that's a fair point, and I think everybody would agree. That's the TMO. I think we've been talking about this. I'm pretty sure Ringrose's try was off the same phase of play. I think whether it was the Italian clearance that ended up being a line out to Ireland or whatever it is. So it didn't cost us.
Well, it was a turnover, so they got it back and they cleared it. So I wouldn't put it in the same phase of play. We started again and then we scored. But the point is right that if that was your only chance, and it was, I think what people might want to understand here, how that came about, maybe people know, but just to quickly go through it. What happened is the TMO looked at that and independently made a decision. There was no downward pressure, which I thought was wrong. I mean, it's a bad call for the stop, but it's a TMO call. And then he relayed to the referee, said he didn't get downward pressure. So the referee has to take him at his word, or else he stops, everything goes back and disagrees with him. That's not going to happen. So the referee shouldn't take flack here. It was the TMO should get flack for relaying a bad message to the ref. And I think Henderson was shot. I think that it was beyond. No, it was definitely a try.
100% agree with that.
I've seen worse ones given. I've seen less pressure given a try given.
Absolutely. But when you're in a sport that does allow video evidence and a TMO in this case, like you could see that Ian Henderson was in absolute shock that he'd scored a try and it wasn't going to be given, because why wouldn't it be? Like, you know,
I don't know how Pot came to that decision, because at first glance, when you look at it in replay, you say that's a try. You know,
it's clear. Yeah.
I don't know how he can come to that decision. It's
especially when you were replay, Wally. The TMO, there were about 2 or 3 replays of that and still called it wrong.
Yeah.
So. Look, well, it doesn't. You know, the only good thing is it makes no difference today. But as you know, the viewer called in and said, like, what if it's the only try of the game and you lose? That's where it gets real. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just on. So this was nothing to do with the referee. This is a Romain Poit bout of madness, which I suppose we've seen in the past. But this referee will be in charge of the Ireland-England game, the last game of the competition, last Irish game of the competition. So it is worth thinking about his performance today. Was he finicky? There was 10 penalties in the first 22, 10 penalties given. There was Ireland, I think, had 2 advantages when they scored a try. So it's 12 penalties awarded or by the referee in the first 22 minutes of the game. I don't know if you could argue with too many of them, but it just did feel like he was a finicky referee about certain things.
He was very strict at the breakdown, very strict. And Ireland, actually, it was probably one of the, you know, maybe the things that Ireland will take as a work on into the future games, because their reading of the breakdown area, getting, you know, maybe caught on the wrong side, or, you know, if a player is getting his knee on the ground, just leaving go. They were getting a lot of penalties there in the first half. I think I counted 8 or 9, you know, which certainly under Joe Smith wouldn't have happened. But, you know, I think it's an area that we need to really focus in on and being a little bit more disciplined, because if we're going to have them against England, that'll be certainly one thing we'll be watching out for, that penalties at the breakdown. And also, obviously, there was a couple in the line-out as well too. But I did notice that he seemed to be just going with the wind in terms of the scrum penalties too. There was a couple that I would have thought were completely wrong, you know. There's one maybe where Ireland were at fault and Italy got the penalty, and vice versa. So it's a little bit of a lottery there, but certainly the breakdown is one area that we need to be a little bit hotter.
I think as well, Wally,
it's been a bit of a pattern, I think, as well too. You know,
I think as well, there's obviously penalties. Sorry, Ollie. I also think what adds to the penalty count today maybe is there's a couple of areas that they get notifications on during the week that they've got to step up on. Like, for example, the kick chase. He hammered Italy for being in front of the kicker, which is something that's not really refereed a lot, which I think, they should referee it. You know, it gives the receiver more time to counter-attack, which is good for the game. And then the other one was the blocking in the line-out. That's been outlawed for a long time. It was a hot potato for a while. And then, like everything else, people forget about it. And you know, once the ref stops corralling that, fellas slip it in again. Like, who wouldn't? Because once you get that blocker in front, you can't stop them all. So, and I think
we need to be smarter though, because he gave one in the first half, and then I think it was Porter gave one. You know, he came on, and you know, they should be told, look, he's you know,
he's hot on that today.
It needs to be communicated to the guys on the touchline on the field that, look, we can't do that in the lineup. We need to be really nailed on.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but I was just wondering, is that something that's worth thinking about? Again, you beat Italy by 38 points or whatever. These things don't come up. But in the Joe Schmidt era, it did feel like we knew what a referee was going to do in advance. That Ireland seemed to coach that way. If a referee is refereeing a breakdown in a certain way or something like that, the subs at least is it a sign of undercoaching in somewhat? I mean, we talked a couple of weeks ago about how there was a sense of go out and enjoy yourselves about this Ireland team that might be unfair to the Andy Farrell era. But is that an example of where we might not be, the meticulous coaching isn't there in the way it was in the past?
Should be smarter around that. I mean, Wally, you remember we used to do a good analysis on each referee. And we would do a Friday session. We'd go through the referee and what his hot buttons were, what they weren't. And like, a good example, now you don't see it anymore. There was a time when referees used to say, rock hands away. Remember that? They used to say, rock hands away, so everyone knew you couldn't handle the ball. But some referees said, rock hands away, and then they penalised you. Some referees said it twice before they penalised you, and some said it 3 times before they penalised you. So you'd know going into the game, is he a 1, 2, or 3 rock hands away merchant? So if he's a 3 hands away, you'd keep your hand on the ball for 2 occasions and then take it off, so you wouldn't get into the third one. So guys knew that. So these referees are analysed granularly. Now, on the day, they can change a little. They can, but you have to adapt. And I think the big takeaway from referees, the big bugbear, is not them penalising stuff If they see something's wrong, they have to blow it. That's their call. But consistency around it. If you're going to penalise this today, then that's penalise it for 80 minutes. Don't let it go for 60 and penalise for the last 20. Or don't penalise for 60 and let go for the last 20. You know, be consistent to everybody. And I thought he was today. I thought he was consistent. He was harsh with the rock.
I would like to... Sorry, Eddie. I would like to see the referees, you know, the focus or maybe on the kick chase. I mean, I think that has a minimal effect probably on the game. You would like to see them putting more emphasis on the offside creep around the rucks, because it's more often than not the teams as a whole are offside. You know, the first guy is a step, and then if you get out to you know 15, 20 meters out from that, they could be a meter offside, and it's that creep because no one is jumping out of the line. It doesn't look obvious, but if the team does it as a whole, you know, you can get away with it, and it just
if you're going to be offside together.
Yeah, and it's something that, you know, the referee has so much going on at the breakdown that he probably can't focus on that because he hasn't got eyes in the back of his head. But his TMOs or his touch judges need to be filtered.
Wally, I don't know if you know the answer to this. Do you know the answer to this, Wally? But do these touch judges play much of a part in that? I'm not sure. Or is it up to the referee? Some referees like a lot of chatter from the assistant refs. Others refs don't. But I think that's an area that could be easily patrolled by the assistant referees.
I asked a referee about that before, and he said that they give a general trend. So if it's happening 4 or 5 times, but you know, if it happens once or twice, the damage is done. You know, you're getting 4 or 5 times. You know, your quid's in. So it's the one area I think would open up the game from attack and from spectacle and everything.
Yeah, I agree. It's an area that's not patrolled particularly well, and it's advantage defence, and as I say, like more collisions because there's nothing else on.
It's a sign that Ireland won handily, lads, that we're talking about the general refereeing in rugby, and we're repopulating the Six Nations in this conversation. But I really did enjoy the chat, lads. Thanks so much, Eddie O'Sullivan and David Wallace. Really appreciate it. That's it from us today on the takeaway with Chicago Town. Thanks a million again to David and to Eddie, and for all of you for watching and for everybody who commented over the course of the show. We'll be back again in 2 weeks for live reaction to Ireland's trip to Murrayfield. Before then, stay tuned to our channels. Eddie will be back with the breakdown of the game on the deep dive with Chicago Town. Then join us on Sunday week and pick yourself up a Chicago Town pizza for the game. They're really a great addition to any Six Nations match. Take it easy.